Good morning to everybody. My name is Lorenzo Juris. I'm the CEO of Creative Zone. We're one of the largest business setup advisory companies in the UAE. We were established 10 years ago. And with me, I have Alistair Payne. He is a business setup manager at Creative Zone. He's our most senior business setup manager. He's been with Creative Zone for about 8 years, I understand. I think there's very few people in Dubai that would know as much as Alistair when it comes to the structures and the best formats for setting up companies in Dubai and the UAE. Alistair, thank you so much for connecting with us. And it's so nice to have you here with us and to share your knowledge on the best possible solutions for company formations.
Perfect. Thank you, Lorenzo, and thank you to everyone attending. I look forward to a fruitful discussion.
Excellent. And again, this is an initiative by the Dubai Businesswomen Council in collaboration with Creative Zone. We've been doing a few different webinars on different topics, and I understand that Dubai Businesswomen Council has this as a part of webinars that they're doing for mentorship and coaching their network and other people that are looking to set up businesses here. So we can get started. Thank you all for connecting. We have about 80 people on the Zoom call and the other people on the Facebook Live. So I'll be sharing a little presentation so that we can sort of pinpoint a few ideas that we want to send across today. Let me click on here. 1 second. There we go. Share screen. Good. I think you can see my screen by now, right? Is it showing, Alistair?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Let me put it on this viewing format. So today's topic, as we said, is setting up a business in the UAE. Very briefly, maybe just before we get started, a small idea about who we are and what it is that we do. Creative Zone, as I said, we were established 11 years ago in Dubai by 3 partners, and we have helped over these 11 years about 44,000 people to set up their businesses, deal with their visas, residency visas, and other PRO services that we deliver for our clients. 4,015 is the average number of customers that we do per year. So we do an average of 350 licenses a month. And this is all type of licenses for free zone companies, for DD companies in Abu Dhabi. And we also recently started offering business setup solutions in Saudi Arabia. An interesting figure is that out of these 350 clients that we do every month, or the 4,000 that we do every year, there's about a 75% conversion ratio of people that renew their license after year 1. This is an important factor because it talks about this issue that many people have the feeling that startups do not succeed after year 1 or 2. And this is not so much what we see. Here in Dubai, people tend to give their startup a bit of a longer sort of period to make it work. And it's about 75% of these startups, it is that they renew their licenses after year 1. We work with over 18 jurisdictions around the UAE. As I said, different free zones and DED jurisdictions in the 7 Emirates, 22 languages spoken, and 250 is the number of staff that we have in our company. We have 250 plus employees inside the group. We like to call ourselves that we create a supportive ecosystem for startups. In Dubai, like anywhere around the world, when you start your business, you need a lot more than somebody to help you with the right formats for setting up a business. You will be needing tax and accounting support, compliance support. Banking is an important element. A lot of companies are struggling to open bank accounts. I'm sure that's going to be one of the topics that we will discuss today. We support startups with HR solutions, in recruitment, in finding the staff that they need for growing their businesses. We've secured many partnerships with companies like Teller here and DHL for those that are opening e-commerce companies. Allsquare is another of our sister entities that we provide business solutions for companies that would like to have phone answering services. We've done agreements with Microsoft, with Soho One, where we are giving special discounted products to our list of startups. So the list goes on and on. So when you deal with Creative Zone, we help startups in so many other levels that it's not only about company formation. So when it comes to entrepreneurship in the UAE, there's a lot of interesting factors. There was a poll done recently that it was saying that 6 out of 10 UAE residents are looking to be self-employed, that they would like to be entrepreneurs and own their own businesses. This shows the sort of important entrepreneurship spirit that this country has when it comes to people wanting to set up their companies, and the fact that it represents that startups and SMEs represent 53% of the total GDP of the UAE. That shows how important the SME sector is for the country. The UAE ranks number 1 regionally and 4th worldwide when it comes to the right environment for global entrepreneurs to set up here in the country. And over $1 billion were invested in the recent years in MENA-based startups. We have actually a slide that talks about the most important unicorns and startups that we've seen grow in the region over the last few years. Out of the most important profitable businesses that we've seen at Creative Zone, we see many activities, many type of companies that are being formed month by month. But for example, lately we've seen an increase of e-commerce and online delivery apps. We've seen a surge. Alistair is going to be able to speak a little bit on that, on the type of clients that we're sort of mostly setting up these days. A lot of health startups we've seen in the last few months. And then you have the traditional management, marketing and business consultants, digital marketing agencies, a lot of F&B type of companies, food trucks, etc. Some of the unicorns that we've seen grow over the last few years, we've had the cases and the examples of Fetcher, Ecar, who has been sort of calculated to be worth $18 million. Ecar is a company that was set up by Creative Zone with Wilhelm, who is the founding partner and the CEO of Ecar. But we've seen many successful startups, Mom's World, Yala Compare, and many more. We have Donna Benton, who started a company with us, The Entertainer, that I understand it was also sold for a few $1 million. So there's been a lot of successful startups in the region. These are some of the challenges faced by startups nowadays. When you're looking to start a new business, the main challenges that we see is this issue of the difficulty of obtaining the right information on how to set up a business. I think people don't understand, don't know enough how important it is to go and get started with the right format. You need to know exactly what is the right free zone for you, what is the right list of activities. I've seen many companies get started at the beginning, and very quickly after year 1 or 2, they realized that they could have had a better structure in another free zone with another list of activities. So it's very important that when you set up, you very quickly know what is the most sort of cost efficient and something that will let you grow a little bit better going forward. So again, Alistair will talk about what are the differences between setting up in a free zone or in DED, which structure will allow you and be more flexible to grow in the years to come. A lack of knowledge on legal structures. Alistair again will talk about that. There's been an increase on compliance over the last year or so with the introduction of ESR regulations, UBO, anti-money laundering, and the VAT reporting that I think was introduced back in 2017. So, you know, a lot of this is making a little bit more complex when it comes to the compliance of SMEs and how they need to stay compliant with government regulations. So again, as a company, we facilitate access to these things, information, so that we make life easier for those entrepreneurs. Access to funding and local partners, that's another important challenge that many of the startups have nowadays, although there's been an increase of VC, incubator companies that are looking to take part of a lot of the startups. And the last point is finding the right environment to grow your business. Incubators, accelerators. I think it's very important that startups get involved in this type of programs because they get to learn and expose themselves with a lot of peers that have had similar journey to the ones that they are going through. Why the UAE? Many of you are already part of the UAE. I'm not going to be spending a lot on this because I want us to go deeper on the structures and what is more convenient. Then we're going to take some questions for you. But everybody knows that now Dubai is thriving because we've seen that Dubai has handled the whole COVID-19 situation very positively. It kept a very vibrant place for business, for connectivity. We've seen people from all over the world being in Dubai nowadays, sort of escaping a little bit the situations in Europe and other countries. And you've seen, for example, now the US is introducing higher taxes for corporations. So Dubai still remains a very attractive place to set up and do business. Just because of being a 0% tax jurisdiction, is a welcoming nation for foreign investors. You have a world-class banking system. The rule of law is very strong in the country, and the quality of life that you get to enjoy while being here. So I think many of you today are already based in Dubai, so I think I don't need to sell too much about why we are all enjoying being in this beautiful city. Where in the UAE? So now this is where it becomes a little bit more attractive in this conversation of where should I be setting up a company? So I will pass this on to Alistair now, and he will start talking about what are the different areas and jurisdictions that you could be setting up a business. Alistair?
Yeah, thank you again, Lorenzo, and good morning to everyone. Thank you again for tuning in. So, company set up here in the UAE, it is a little bit of a daunting prospect when you actually look at the number of options you have. For a relatively small country, we have over 60 licensing jurisdictions here in the UAE, and they're generally categorized into two main categories. Option one, I'd say probably maybe the less well-known option, is what's called the mainland setup. And you have mainland licensing jurisdictions in all 7 emirates. Usually they are referred to as Department of Economic Development, or DED for short. Mainland companies is actually gotten a lot easier to set up in the mainland than it traditionally used to be. We'll maybe come on to a little bit more on that later. And then option 2, and probably the most well-known option out there, is the free trade zone setup. There are currently over 53 active free zones here in the UAE, dotted around all 7 emirates. There are free zones that cater to particular industries, free zones that cater to particular types of businesses that are strategically located at the ports, sea and airports. And there are also free zones that cater to all types of businesses as well. And you also do have 2 types of free zone. You have what's called a classic, let's say, onshore free zone, and you also have what's called an offshore free zone, which are free zones, albeit geographically located inside the UAE, are usually governed under a different set of rules and regulations than your standard UAE free zones. But we'll maybe come on to that at a later stage. Some of the examples are there. We work heavily with all of these free zones that offer expatriates, entrepreneurs, SMEs a lot of advantages. Usually, a lot of these free zones, you can incorporate the business remotely. You would only really need a copy of your passport and a copy of the last entry stamp. And generally speaking, these companies are incorporated in 3 to 4 working days. So they're usually quick, efficient, and usually cost-effective options as well. I think we move to the next slide. Benefits to a mainland license. We just touched on it there. The mainland has really opened up in the last couple of years. It's removed a lot of the red tape that used to be there. Now you can set up mainland licenses on co-working addresses, so you don't have to rent independent office space yourself. There is no longer a requirement for annually audited accounts. Nearly all the business activities now do not require you to pay up the share capital. And I'd say the most importantly is you get the flexibility to do business locally. Free zone companies are generally prohibited to operating in the free zones or offshore internationally. A mainland company can operate freely, both with government-owned companies and private companies as well. Fewer nationality restrictions, I think that's also an important point as well. Some of the free zones do have nationality restrictions. In the mainland, we don't really see them. We've spoken about the office premises as well. And definitely the most prestigious license and powerful trade license you can hold. And that does also play a big advantage when dealing with local banks here. You generally get a bank account a lot quicker and a lot easier with a mainland license compared to a free zone. We move on now to benefits to a free zone license, which will be on the next slide.
So it's a bit delayed on the moving the slides. There we go.
There we are. I guess the most well-known benefit is 100% ownership. In the mainland, there are still a few activities that require a 51% sponsor. In the free zone, that is not the case. All companies can be owned 100%. We've spoken about the vast array of free zone options dotted around all 7 Emirates. We've spoken about the ease and efficiency of setting up, usually no physical office required, usually no annually audited accounts, and usually the free zone companies can be incorporated with the shareholders not inside the country. Credit Zone is a registered agent of all major free zones in the UAE. We work heavily with all the major ones, both in the Northern Emirates, in Dubai and Abu Dhabi as well. Free zone companies, of course, you have 100% repatriation of all capital and profits. Physical presence not required, as we've discussed, and company documentation is usually issued within 3 to 4 working days. Some more sort of side-by-side benefits here. We've spoken about the ownership. In the mainland, more and more business activities are being opened up to the 100% ownership. I'm sure for people tuning in who are based inside the UAE, we all saw the news articles at the tail end of last year, which has got everyone very excited, and more activities are being added to this green list to allow 100% ownership. The cost of mainland licenses is falling all the time. We see it comparable now to the free zone. Yes, it is still more. It is still a little bit more to set up in the mainland, but certainly not as much as it used to be. Free zone packages now you can pick up for as low as 5,750 on a 0 visa package, and on a 1 visa package, they generally start at around 15,000 dirhams. Office space we've spoken about. Generally, nearly all the free zones don't require you to rent physical office space. In the mainland, an address is needed, but again, Creative Zone have solutions where you won't need to rent any independent space yourself. Visas are a little bit less restricted in the mainland. They generally go off the size of the address as allocated to the license. In the free zone, again, you have a bit of flexibility, generally up to 6 or up to 10 visas is your cap in the free zones. Business scope, we've sort of already spoken about the flexibility the mainland license offers. It allows you to operate freely without the sort of ambiguity of offering services or goods or products outside the free zone area. Banking, we've already touched on, a little bit more flexible in the mainland compared to the free zone, and annually audited accounts, not required for nearly all the free zone companies. And in the mainland, some activities do require it, but a lot of activities don't. Share capital, we've spoken about share capital. It used to be the case 6 years ago in the mainland, you had to pay up the share capital. It's no longer required. So it's very similar to the free zone in that respect. You do not have to pay up the share capital. And that's nearly all of the business activities. Now, business activities, we've spoken about a little bit as well. In the mainland and in the free zone, you have the ability to combine. In the mainland, you can get up to 10 activities on 1 license. Generally in the free zones, you're capped at around 3. External approvals, if you have a business activity that requires an additional approval, whether that's from Dubai Municipality, whether it's from the Road and Traffic Department, whether it's immigration or DTCM, generally speaking, you're going to have to incorporate in the mainland. Those approvals generally won't happen under a free zone company. Nationality restrictions, I think we've already touched on. Employee protection, I think this is relevant as well. In the mainland, there are legislation and rules that mainland companies have to follow with regards to remunerating employees. It's now very strictly enforced through the wage protection system and Ministry of Labour. Again, free zone companies are still bound, of course, to pay their employees, but I'd say it's not as regulated as it is in the mainland. Insurance, medical insurance is generally mandatory for all mainland employees. The cost of that should be borne by the employer rather than the employees. A lot of the free zones don't enforce this. Medical insurance is optional. Of course, if you live here, highly advisable. Import duties, again, I'd say it's a benefit of being in the free zone. You generally get exempted from paying those import duties unless you plan to sell the goods locally. In the mainland, you have to pay the import duty regardless of whatever you're doing with the goods. So I think that's summarized.
Good. And before we move into the company options and the different legal structures, I'll encourage everybody to start putting your questions on the Q&A section. We're going to be reading a few of your questions because I'm sure many of you have different options. Some of you have different activities, different type of operations that you want to set up. So we're happy to take a few minutes to read a few of those and try to answer some of those questions. And to all of you that are connected today as well, we're going to be sharing this presentation. So we're happy to send this across. And also do not hesitate to get in touch with Alistair or myself if you would like to learn more, or if you directly need to set up a company, we'll be happy to assist. So to our tech team, if they can include our email addresses onto the chat there as well, we're happy to communicate with you as well going forward. So Alistair, yeah.
Yeah, so moving on to sort of legal types of company, and I think sometimes this is often overlooked by entrepreneurs. What legal type does my company have? I think in a country where bankruptcy laws are not what they are, particularly in the Western world, it's definitely worth considering. So I'd say one of the best legal types one can have is what's called a limited liability company. Now, in the mainland, to obtain a limited liability legal status, you have to have a local sponsor owning the business 51%. Credit Zone have solutions around that. Credit Zone have the ability to act as the local sponsor, so you wouldn't have to go and find your own individual Emirati. You are protected. Of course, limited liability means only the company is liable. The shareholders don't have personal liability in the business. Credit Zone, again, have more elaborate risk mitigation packages where we can completely ring fence any liability whatsoever. And we do that through structuring, through offshore free zones here, something that I won't get into here, but if anyone has any questions on that, please do get in touch. And a very good point, Credit Zone are currently engaged by some of the UAE's best known and international brands as well. We're currently engaged as sponsors in Entertainer, eCar, UDrive, Sumo Sushi, Hyundai, LG Electronics. This is just to name a few. So we have a reputation that we've built up over the last 10 years, and we fight every day to maintain. If we move on to the next slide, sole establishment. So when someone owns a business 100% as an expatriate in the mainland, you are legally defined as what's called a sole establishment. It's similar in essence to a sole trader back in the UK. What this basically means is the shareholder is personally liable in the company. So if anything does go wrong, if bankruptcy was to come in, the shareholder would have personal liability. So it is important. It is an important thing to consider, particularly in this part of the world. A civil company is similar in the sense the shareholders still retain personal liability, but a sole establishment is for one individual shareholder. If you're two or more, you'll be a civil company. The next legal type is branch. If you have a foreign company already, we can create branches both in the mainland and in the free zones. To do that does add a bit of documentation on, and depending on where we set up the company, mainland or free zone, we may incur additional fees as well. Of course, a branch is legally defined as an extension of its parent company. So liability is really retained by the parent company, as is all the shares. So any branch will always be 100% owned by the parent company. You're just required to appoint a local service agent in the mainland. Professional activities, as we sort of touched on, now nearly every professional activity can be 100% owned. I've already seen a question in the Q&A. Yes, there was some media announcements released. We're still waiting for a lot of that to be enforced, but now nearly all professional activities in the mainland are allowed to be 100% owned by expatriates. You retain all capital and profits, but if you do own the company, you retain personal liability in the business.
Right, and as we were saying earlier, the last year or so has seen the introduction of a few new policies and further regulation and compliance across the business in the UAE. So tax and VAT reporting, we've seen this introduced already back in 2008, and it became a standard rate of 5%. Earlier in 2020, I think it was introduced around September, the ultimate beneficiary owner registration was needed for all companies, for all free zones and Dubai mainland, for all companies registered in the UAE, need to do the registration of who is the ultimate beneficiary owner. There's a whole set of rules and validations that need to take place. And in fact, for that, we also have a sister entity called Creative Zone Tax and Accounting, that helps entities and companies in the UAE with this type of registration. We've seen also the introduction of the Economic Substance Regulation, ESR, that it was recently introduced also and it was amended in 2020. And recently the anti-money laundering law has also seen some changes. I think it was already introduced back a few years ago, but it's seen a further inclusion of certain changes, and it's become a little bit stricter, I would say, in terms of what needs to be done in the case that there's persons that fall under what is called the gray category, blacklisted type of nationalities, when you owning a company and you're engaging with these type of nationalities, what needs to be done from a reporting point of view. So there's been quite a few changes when it comes to regulation and compliance, and it's all about making the UAE and Dubai a lot more transparent and regulated place that is good for the jurisdiction and for the country overall, for the destination in the long run. I'm not sure if we had other slides. No, that was the end of the presentation. I see a lot of other questions coming through. We're going to be addressing some of those. Let me stop sharing for now, and also maybe just to recap, Alistair, on this topic of activities and type of companies that you've seen, people coming, e-commerce. What type of entities have you seen a lot of interest over the last few months?
Yeah, absolutely. E-commerce, I definitely think is the hot activity. It's by far and away our most popular. A lot of businesses, because of coronavirus, have had to shift their services online. So e-commerce is by far and away the top activity. Where we are still seeing good traction is your regular trading companies here in the UAE and also in Africa as well. We set up a lot of African clients who are based out of the UAE, but are trading their goods primarily on the African continent. Professional management consultants, again, a lot of businesses are having to restructure. So we're seeing a lot of guys that perhaps were working at maybe some of the big four firms that have now gone out on their own and are offering restructuring consultancy services to business. And of course, we have what's slowly being recognized here is the cryptocurrency traders and the cryptocurrency companies. We see a lot of interest now, particularly from our European client base, in setting up entities here to allow personal trading of cryptocurrency. Now, cryptocurrency is slowly being recognized here in the UAE. The central banks still don't officially recognize it as a legal tender, but jurisdictions such as DMCC and DIFC are now offering business activities in the crypto space. So I think watch this space for crypto. We seem to be very busy answering inquiries in that area. So I think those, in short, would probably be the most popular currently.
Great, good points, Alistair. And in this digital world that we live in nowadays, I think many companies are adopting this more flexible and more virtual type of operation. We've seen an increase of people from different parts of the world setting up their businesses. I think now in Dubai, I think nowadays the world allows for you to set up your company in Dubai and operate in Asia, in Africa, in Europe. Maybe you have a consulting business, maybe you have an e-commerce platform, and you have clients all around the world. Dubai is the perfect place because it's convenient, it's cost effective, you have access to talent. We've seen a surge of that type of companies setting up. We created a program called the Nomad Entrepreneur that is aimed at this type of individual that has more of a flexible setup and has people scattered around the world. You know, nowadays you can have your client relationship team operating out of the Philippines and your operations team or your manufacturing facilities back in China. So it really has become such a global place on the way that we can run our businesses. So I think we can start taking a few good questions. We have 100 people connected, which is great to see, and I see there's a lot of good questions coming through. Let me start reading. And there was the one that you were just referring to, Alistair. I think you were reading one of those. Though somebody was referring to the fact that, yes, there was some changes introduced to the law to 100% ownership, but there is still already the possibility of expats owning 100% of their businesses for the professional licenses, and as well for certain type of commercial activities, it has been opened up. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what has been these changes to the ownership law in the UAE?
Yeah, absolutely. And you summarized it pretty well there, Lorenzo. Nearly every professional activity now in the mainland can be 100% owned. So any consultancy, services, white collar based company can be 100% owned by expatriates. A lot of the service activities now actually give you the choice. You can own it 100%, but as we touched on earlier, you have personal liability. Now, if you want to mitigate that, you still have the option to go the LLC route. You still need to appoint a local sponsor holding 51%. On the commercial activities as well, I'd say it's been a little bit slower in terms of what is being opened up, but the media announcements were very clear in sort of December time. So we expect that to gather some momentum probably into the tail end of this year and going into next year, and more commercial activities will be opened up. I guess Dubai as a whole is on a huge FDI drive and is trying to attract major foreign companies as well as SMEs to come and set up here. So it's all moving in that direction. So yeah, as I say, watch this space, but to answer the person's questions, you can own a company 100% right now in the mainland.
Excellent. There's another good question from Daniel here. I'll be able to answer this. Daniel says, is it possible to open a Dubai free zone digital marketing company and receive residency as an Israeli? We've seen a lot of Israelis coming over to Dubai in the last year or so after the signing of the Abraham Accords back in September. This was great news for both nations. It brought a new sort of wave of interest from both countries to do more business together. And yes, we've seen an inflow of Israeli investors and business owners coming to Dubai and exploring. Yes, we have set up several Israeli-owned companies. Traditionally, we've been doing them through DED, Dubai Mainland, but I know there is one free zone that we know of that is already accepting Israeli visa to do residency visas for Israelis. So Daniel, please get in touch with Alistair. His email is listed in the chat, and he'll be able to give you details on which is the free zone that is accepting Israeli residency visas. And if that's not the case also as well, we can do it through the DED license. There's a few other good questions. I think Stefan here is saying, please explain the difference between sole ownership and a professional license in the mainland. Ali?
So professional license is more your category of business activity, if that makes sense. Sole ownership is more referring to the legal type of the company and the ownership structure of the company. So your business activity dictates whether you're professional, commercial, industrial, or financial, and whichever one of those you fall into then dictates the ownership requirements. So if you're a consultancy company, let's say you are a professional company, you can own the company 100%. So then your legal type would either be sole establishment, where you own the company 100%, or civil company, or you can still opt for the LLC option as well. So business activity, I think, in the mainland in particular, dictates a lot. It dictates your ownership requirements, and it will dictate any additional approval requirements as well.
Excellent. Laura is asking, what's the difference between what you do and the licenses at the DED Cafe? That's a good question, Laura, and thank you for bringing this up. You know, there's different players in this industry. DED Cafe is also a third-party organization that is providing DED licenses. I think I'm familiar with it. It's not part of DED itself. So it's a corporate service provider, the same way as Creative Zone. The important thing that you should look when you engage with a company like Creative Zone is what is it that we are able to do for you. So as I was saying, we will help through getting the residency visas, doing your medicals, doing your dependent visas. We send you our own car with our own driver. You're going to need help through compliance matters, tax and accounting, ESR, all these compliance issues. You need a partner that is going to be constantly giving you the updated information on what is needed. We help you open your bank account. We have a concierge team. We have a platform called CZ Access where we give discounts on what startups need from Microsoft products and Soho CRM. Now we're about to sign a deal with a service provider that gives gyms to people in the UAE. So there's a lot of benefits in which, and the pricing that you get is exactly the same. If you come to us or you go directly to our free zone, the idea is that we are the same pricing, but you get this other list of benefits when you come through Creative Zone. Sorry, I had to take that one, Alistair, and explain the benefits. See if you read a few other questions in between. I'm reading, what are the available options for architecture business to set up a 100% owned company with Dubai-based office other than in D3?
Architecture is usually an activity, particularly in the mainland, that will need an approval by Dubai municipality. It really depends on what sort of services you're offering in and around the architecture sort of space. But if you're heavily involved in, for example, the design of buildings and sort of the construction plans of buildings, there's an approval from Dubai municipality, which is fairly stringent. You need to be a qualified architect. And that activity is actually a good example, albeit professional. It's one of the very few that does still need a local sponsor. And the local sponsor also has to be qualified in architecture or civil engineering. Again, Creative Zone could source these local sponsors. We have many in our pool of sponsors, so we can definitely assist. But I'd love to hear more from that individual. So if they could drop me an email, I'd be happy to have a chat with them and explain what sort of options we would have.
Rajiv is asking a very typical question that we get very often. He says, in a free zone setup for a consulting business, does that also have a restriction to do business in the UAE, or is it only for, it says, management and trading related?
Excellent question. I guess this could be answered in a couple of ways, but as per the company's law here, the free zone companies should only operate within free zones or offshore. So if you're operating outside of the free zone area, either you do so through a local registered agent, or you create a branch and get a branch license under the Department of Economic Development. That is the correct way to operate when looking to operate locally as a free zone company.
Excellent. Another good question says, can someone hold both a free zone and a mainland license for the same company?
Absolutely. Very, very common here. We've just spoken about good structure there. If you wanted to open a free zone company and then credit branch into the mainland under a consultancy activity, yes, you would need to maintain 2 licenses. The branch licenses are usually a little bit cheaper, but you would remove personal liability from the company. So absolutely, it's very, very common here that people hold both.
Maybe we can take a little time also to explain the other more structures and setups that we do that are a little bit more complex when it comes to SPVs, trusts, foundations, with ADGM. It's a bit of your specialty on this as well, Alistair. Maybe can you shed a little more light on those options?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've touched on this sort of liability, 100% ownership question quite a bit today. There are several ways to mitigate risk and liability when owning businesses in the mainland. And usually we would structure things through one of the financial free zones here. So there are 2 main regulated financial free zones. There is DIFC, which I'm sure everyone is familiar who lives in Dubai, but also Abu Dhabi Global Market, which is the Abu Dhabi equivalent of DIFC. Now, although these free zones are geographically located inside the UAE, they are governed under separate rules, laws, and regulations than regular mainland companies. They follow usually English and Welsh common law, not the local civil Sharia law. Under these jurisdictions, we can create various structures that are far more common in the UK, things like trusts, foundations, special purpose vehicles, where we can legally separate and define what's called legal ownership and beneficial ownership as well. So if you're looking to mitigate risk, you're looking to protect your assets, ring fence your liabilities, these structures work really well. Abu Dhabi Global Market is a free zone we operate heavily in. It's cost effective. We have an office up there, and we actually have a separate division of our group as well that is based up there and can help in advising and implementing structures. So I could go on all day about Abu Dhabi Global Market. So if that individual would love to drop me an email, I'd love to have a call meeting we can discuss further.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, these are structures that we've seen are becoming more and more popular, and people are using these kind of structures and special purpose vehicles for ring fencing their assets and reorganizing the way they invest, they manage their companies. People that are even buying properties here, they're setting up this type of SPVs in the country. Another question says, if you have a company registered in another country, what are the requirements to open a branch in the UAE?
Yeah, very good question. So it would depend if we go mainland or free zone. So we'll start with mainland. Actually, we'll start what applies to both. The company documents of the parent company will need to be legalized, attested in the country of origin. So if you have a UK company, you need to take your documents to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. You then need to take them to the UAE Embassy in London and have them stamped by them. The documents will then be counter-attested here by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Justice. That is step one for any branch set up, whether free zone or mainland. Where the requirements differ slightly is if we go into the mainland as a branch, we have to register the branch with the Ministry of Economy as well. Usually that will involve a refundable bank guarantee of 50,000 dirhams. There are also some one-time registration fees and annual registration fees you have to pay to Ministry of Economy as well. That's really only for mainland setups. For free zone setups, you don't have that Ministry of Economy requirement. So as long as the documents are attested, legalized, translated if they're not in English or Arabic, setting up a branch in a free zone is relatively straightforward. Some of the Northern Emirate free zones, Sharjah Media City, for example, have a very efficient service for incorporating branches or subsidiaries. So anyone that has any questions on this as well, again, it's a topic we could speak quite a bit of time about. Please drop me an email. I'll be happy to answer them.
Excellent. This is also a question that comes quite often back to us, Alistair, and I know that you're quite familiar with this because we've set up several real estate companies over the years. He says, can we set up a 100% owned, foreign owned, I'm guessing, company in the mainland for a real estate business?
I mean, if the activity is real estate brokerage and that's operating like a real estate agent here, then no, you cannot. That activity, again, is quite unique. It has to be 100% owned by a local. It can't actually be owned at all by an expatriate or non-GCC national. So we've set up several. It's a very popular activity here. So the real estate market is very popular here. But yeah, to set up a real estate brokerage, unfortunately, it needs to be 100% owned by a local. The expatriate can be a manager, but needs to go and get certified by a body called RERA, who are the Real Estate Regulatory Authority. They are a branch of Dubai Land Department. So yeah, it's quite a complex setup. So yeah, if that individual would like to drop me an email, I'll be happy to walk them through it.
Excellent. And this is saying, I can answer this. It says, besides you, we need to also pay for the law firm to help us set up the office. He's asking, who will help us care about the financial issues after the company has been set up? When it comes to the financials of the entities, we have, as we were saying earlier, a sister company called Creative Zone Tax and Accounting, and we do all sort of accounting and bookkeeping and financial services to companies, from compliance to, as I said, bookkeeping. So, and all our Creative Zone clients have preferential rates for this because this is a service that we deliver in-house. This is not something that we are outsourcing to another group of companies or anything of the sort. So when it comes to the financials, when it comes to the law firm setting up your office, I think with the advice that we are able to give you in terms of the needed documents, and we're able to support to you what is the right office structure if you are to set an office and rent an office for your operation, whether your activity requires an office or not. Alistair, you have anything else on that?
Sorry, Lorenzo, could you repeat the question? You just dropped out.
No, I think he's asking more about office, but traditionally, this is something that doesn't require a law firm to get involved in Dubai. Maybe outside in the UK and other countries, you tend to feel that you do need to engage with law firms for support on this.
Yeah, absolutely. It generally is not required. And if you do need an office or want an office here, Credit Zone can assist. We have several partnerships with real estate agencies here. We own our own business center in downtown Dubai. We have office space there, and we also partner with business centers across Dubai as well. So no need to go for a law firm. All of that can be handled in-house by our team.
Are business licenses easily obtainable after company setups? I guess the person is asking about further approvals and another third-party approvals from other government departments, authorities. That's another good plus. We help companies through that process. Whether you have a media company and you need to go to the national media office of Abu Dhabi to get a permit for publishing a magazine, we help through this, obtaining these extra approvals. Correct, Alistair? Anything else on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we add so much value here, because doing it yourself it would take months and months and months. We have such experience in setting up such a vast array of businesses that we have relationships with all the major external approval departments. We understand how they work, the documents that they need. So definitely, I mean, there's so many here, and depending on the type of your business will depend on which approval you need. But of course, that is all part of our service and all part of our value addition.
Somebody's asking, can you start with a free zone LLC, then later move to a mainland company if required to do so in order to supply UAE government entities? 100%. We see a lot of entities, a lot of companies getting started with a free zone type of companies. They spend a year or two until they grow their business. And then after a couple of years, they realize that they need to start engaging with government entities, with government departments, government authorities. And yes, the UAE government and Dubai and Abu Dhabi will encourage you to have a mainline business. Your business will be seen as a lot more, what's the right word? Trustworthy or better established when you are in the mainland. Does Creative Zone helping funding from banks for new and exciting businesses? Dominic, that's a good question, Dominic. And this gives me the opportunity to introduce that with the Dubai Businesswomen Council, we recently launched a program called She Leads 2.0 and another accelerator program that we're about to announce in the next 10 days or 2 weeks called Startup X. Maybe also our team can put the two links to She Leads and Startup X, that they are going to be two accelerator programs where we're willing to take those promising startups that have a promising future for us to accelerate them. We're going to be choosing a total of 20 startups to go through an incubation program. And after that, 4 of them will be selected to be fully accelerated, to the point that we're willing to give a free trade license to 4 of those selected ones. Let me see what other questions there are there. What will be the minimum investment? I'm guessing it means capital requirement in a free zone setup of a 100% foreign company.
In terms of sort of business setup fees, when we have corporate shareholders, there are free zone packages as low as 8,000-9,000 dirhams if you don't need any visas. If you need visas, generally with corporate shareholders, they're starting around 20,000-21,000. These are your initial setup fees in dirhams. Of course, this is variable depending on how many visas, depending on which free zone that we select. But yeah, those are sort of where the packages start, and always factor in your attestation costs, legalization costs as well. Again, that process isn't cheap in itself. So yeah, always important to consider that.
Right. Well, I'm going to read another 1 or 2 because I think we could stay here all day. We have lots of questions coming through, and as I said, I encourage you to go through our website, www.creativezone.ae. There's a lot of information there as well, and also to connect with Alistair, with myself, or there's another email there, setup@creativezone.ae if you'd like to learn more information. But Dima is asking, can a training institute that provides training in the UAE register in a free zone, or do they have to register on mainland?
Excellent question. I guess, again, are the services going to be provided outside of free zone areas? And if the answer to that question is yes, then yes, we need to be licensed in the mainland. If you're offering these services in Dubai, you're in the space of training or education, we'll also need the approval of KHDA, who are the Knowledge Human Development Authority, who regulate the training and education industry. It's an authority that we deal with extensively. They have fairly specific requirements, particularly on the space that you need, and depending on the services you offer, the qualifications of either the manager or the owner. So yes, it's possible to operate as a free zone company, providing the services are only offered in the free zone area. But if they're offered in the mainland area, better to go in the mainland.
Yeah, similar. Stephen is asking, what happens if I set up in a free zone but trade in mainland? There's a few sort of distinctions there. We've seen a lot of e-commerce companies setting up on a free zone, but later on they have a distribution company distributing their products on the mainland. So that's totally fine. Do you want to make some distinctions on this topic, Alistair?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're outsourcing, and that's a good example, a lot of e-commerce are going into free zones, but fulfillment, storage, logistics are all outsourced to third-party providers who have the appropriate mainland licenses. So if your business can function in that way where you're outsourcing delivery of products or services, then absolutely the free zone model works very well. And of course, if you're offering services predominantly outside of the UAE, again, the free zone model works well. But if you want to offer services locally, really you should have a mainland license. So yeah, that would be my advice. Excellent.
All right, well, I think we're coming to the end of this session for today. I think we've had a lot of information back and forth. We're happy to take more questions going forward. You can write to us on the emails, call us on our landlines, ask for Alistair. We have a team of 15 business setup advisors that are ready to answer your questions. And we're happy to help. We've been here in Dubai for 10 years supporting the startup and entrepreneurship ecosystem. And we enjoy learning about people's projects, what it is that they do, and get you to be part of the Creative Zone family. So we would like to thank everybody, to all the attendees, 100 attendees on the Zoom link, and to the people watching on the Facebook Live, to the Dubai Business Women Council, Nadine Halabi and her team for organizing this. It's a pleasure for us to collaborate with the Dubai Business Women Council on this and so many other initiatives. So thanks again, Alistair. Thank you so much for your time. I'm sure you're going to have about 100 emails when you go back to your computer after this. So good luck to everybody. All the best, and thank you for connecting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.